President Biden delivered the annual State of the Union address last night. It was pretty much what we expected. A little over an hour of delusional nonsense that failed to seriously address any of the failures over the last year. I'll take a look at what the president had to say, what he didn't say, and all the rest of it in tonight's Hold the Line.
So on this night, on our 245th year as a nation, I've come to report on the state of the nation, the State of the Union. And my report is this: the State of the Union is strong because you, the American people, are strong.
Welcome to Hold the Line. I'm Buck Sexton. Biden saying, we, the American people, are strong. It's all good. No problem. It's going to be fantastic. Great year he's put in the books, right? This is one of the worst first years of any presidency in memory. The economy, the border, inflation, crime, national security, Afghanistan withdrawal, now war in Europe with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. What exactly can Biden and all of his cronies point to as some kind of success? Look, he had a tough job to do last night insofar as the record really speaks for itself, and it's saying this is crappy. This has not gone well at all. That much, I think, is apparent to everybody who's paying attention to this country and who's not a member of the Democrat Party desperately trying to spin propaganda to convince the American people, most notably independents who have completely turned on Joe Biden because they realize this was a disaster, a mess. This guy's not a uniter. He looks like he's lost more than a step, and the whole thing is just absurd. It's preposterous. These Democrats are out of their minds. Last night he started out, as many expected, talking about Ukraine and how we have an unwavering resolve about freedom and, tyranny's bad, stuff like that. Watch.
Last year, COVID-19 kept us apart. This year, we're finally together again. Tonight, we meet as Democrats, Republicans, and Independents, but most importantly, as Americans, with the duty to one another, to America, to the American people, to the Constitution, and an unwavering resolve that freedom will always triumph over tyranny.
It's interesting because they were the ones, the Democrats, who instituted the COVID tyranny that did nothing to stop the spread and made us all additionally miserable beyond even what the virus would have done and did, because it spread all over the place despite all the mitigation measures that they put us through, as if that was sensible and reasonable at all. It, of course, was not. But they're going to have to rewrite this history as much as they possibly can, because they know they're heading into a midterm election where they're likely to get annihilated. By the way, the Democrats deserve to get completely, utterly humiliated in the midterm elections coming up. If we live in an America where there's still enough people who can see reality for what it is, Democrats will be repudiated at the ballot box. It will be a total smackdown of what they've done over the last year, which has just failed and been absurd and idiotic on so many levels. And then there's just, speaking of idiotic, Joe Biden is somebody who really doesn't seem like he's up for this. He was just one of many flubs. People were noticing this is a guy who, it's kind of hard to understand what he says sometimes. Looks like he's slurring his words a little bit. He's running through stuff. He meanders. The whole speech, which was written, of course, it was read off of prompters, felt very meandering to begin with. But Biden, of course, made it worse with his, stuff like this. Watch.
Putin may circle Kyiv with tanks, but he'll never gain the hearts and souls of the Iranian people.
Never gain the hearts and souls of probably true. I don't think he will gain the hearts and souls of the Iranian people, but I think we all know he meant Ukrainian. Kamala Harris, we'll talk about this later, actually mouthed, we think, the word Ukrainian when he said that. But no, it's not just that Biden said it, it's that he said it out loud during State of the Union address and didn't correct himself. Almost like, whatever, all the same thing. The COVID stuff that was going on last night was probably more offensive than anything else. They've taken masks off, but they're still social distancing, because that makes a lot of sense. They're all vaccinated, of course, and boosted. All these Democrats boosted. Give me more boosters. I need more boosters. Yeah, it worked out so well, didn't it? Here's Biden talking about how well the vaccines, he says, do work to stop the spread. Watch.
Because you can't build a wall high enough to keep out a a vaccine. The vaccine can stop the spread of these diseases.
The vaccine can stop the spread of these diseases. That's just not true. They didn't stop the spread of the disease at all. We saw with Omicron, the vaccine almost entirely failed to stop the spread of the virus. I mean, de minimis if it had any real effect on stopping spread. It was somewhat effective in preventing hospitalization and death for those who were already at high risk, but that's just a small percentage of the population. So what about everybody else? What about all those 20-year-olds who got the shot to make sure they were protecting grandma? Grandma was exposed to the virus anyway. So really, we just needed to get the shot to grandma if you see how this actually works. We didn't have to do all this. Get the 20-year-olds, get the 15, get everyone there. No, didn't need to happen. Another thing that didn't need to happen was the Democrat Party's support of Black Lives Matter and undermining law enforcement and making it as easy as possible for criminals to run roughshod over communities all across the country. That's actually what's happened in the last 18 months in particular, but certainly in the last year, the Biden administration. Democrats made this all much worse. So now they're actually talking about, forget about defund the police, they want to refund police. They want more money for them. Listen to this.
I know what works. Investigating crime prevention and community policing, cops who walk the beat, who know the neighborhood, and who can restore trust and safety. Let's not abandon our streets or choose between safety and equal justice. Let's come together and protect our communities, restore trust, and hold law enforcement accountable. That's why the Justice Department has required body cameras, banned chokeholds, and restricted no-knock warrants for its officers. That's why the American Rescue Plan that you all provided $350 billion that cities, states, and counties can use to hire more police, invest in more proven strategies.
Hire more police? Wait, but I thought Democrats were convinced that police made things worse. That's why we had to move funding from them to violence interrupters and social workers. Remember all that? Yeah, a lot of people suffered. People were attacked. People died in communities all across America because of that Democrat lunacy. And they should be, once again, held to account in the midterm election. They should face electoral annihilation. That would be some measure of justice. And then there was a moment last night where Joe Biden was talking about those who serve this country and those who have given their lives in the service of this country, the United States military. He also brought up his son, who died of a brain tumor, did not actually die from combat-related activity. And he left out during this discussion any mention of the 13 U.S. service members who died in the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. And Representative Boebert of Colorado, she had enough. Watch.
The third piece of that agenda is support our veterans. And our troops in Iraq and Afghanistan have faced many dangers, one being stationed at bases breathing in toxic smoke from burn pits. Many of you have been there. I've been in and out of Iraq and Afghanistan over 40 times. These burn pits that incinerate waste, the waste of war, medical and hazardous material, jet fuel, and so much more. And they come home, many of the world's fittest and best trained warriors in the world. Never the same. Headaches, numbness, dizziness. A cancer that would put them in a flag-draped coffin. I know. One of those soldiers was my son, Major Bo Biden.
Boebert had enough, as you can tell. All right, we have more on President Biden's delusional State of the Union address with the American Conservative Union's Mercedes Schlapp when we come back. Let's talk about protecting your home. How devastated would you be if a criminal stole all the equity in your home? This crime is happening all over the U.S., and there's one company out there standing between you and the thieves, Home Title Lock. The FBI says home title fraud is on the rise. HomeTitleLock.com is America's leader in home title protection. The deed to your home is online, so the bad guys forge your name off the deed to your home, refiles the new owner, then they can take out loans. You might not even find out about this until you're evicted. Common identity theft services don't protect you. HomeTitleLock.com is your peace of mind that the deed to your home is protected. Visit HomeTitleLock.com. Again, that's HomeTitleLock.com. We'll be right back with Mercedes Schlapp. Stay right there. President Biden managed to speak for 62 minutes during last night's State of the Union address, but he didn't manage to say a whole lot, and conservatives aren't the only ones who noticed. Even people who are reliably in the president's corner weren't really impressed. Here's what The Atlantic's Peter Wenner had to say about the performance. Listen.
Jonathan may be right. The bookends of the speech may have been good, but I'm not sure how many people hung around and were focused at the end. The other thing I'd say is, if I were a Democrat, I'd be somewhat concerned because this, as we discussed at the beginning, could have been a course correction for his presidency, because this is a wounded presidency. And I don't think that was it. This was not a kind of Bill Clinton, the era of big government has ended. This was more Joe Biden saying, we've achieved a lot and I should get better credit than I have.
Indeed, here to give her reaction to Biden's State of the Union address is senior fellow at the American Conservative Union, Mercedes Schlapp, former White House official under Trump, of course. Mercedes, good to see you.
Great to see you, Buck, and thanks for being with us in CPAC, Florida this past weekend.
Thank you for having me. It was a great event, as always. So, Mercedes, what do you think? Top line, 30,000-foot view thoughts of the Biden State of the Union.
The speech was so mind-boggling that the mere fact that President Biden talked about securing the border and funding the police, you have to wonder if the poll numbers that he was reading basically said, look, we got to insert this into the speech. Look, I've gone through this process with, especially with President Trump, where it takes months to put a State of the Union address together. You start by really brainstorming on what are the top policies, what are the top achievements. Then you bring in personal stories to basically thread that narrative. I felt the speech really fell flat, and it was a bit of a patchwork. It looked like if they had gone different pieces of it and then just added on the Ukraine piece right at the top. And he really could not, there was, talk about no meat, but a lot of potatoes. That's pretty much what the American people got this time around in the State of the Union address.
The showing up without masks on, but social distancing in the House chamber, and then shaking hands and hugging. How do we make sense of that as rational human beings? You want to take that one on for a second?
Oh, goodness. I think you tweeted about this earlier on, Buck. But look, my teenage daughter, who goes to a Catholic school in Washington, D.C., still has to wear a mask. And she told me, she's 17 years old, she said, I just cannot believe that the President of the United States, who lives in Washington, D.C., doesn't have to wear a mask, can go and shake hands and hug people. And yet I, as a junior in high school, am forced to wear a mask. It is hypocritical. It is unfair. They have created huge damage on our children. And it just shows that the Democrats, it was never about following the science. It was about control and power, and they dictating the terms to us of what we have to do and what mask we have to wear. I mean, I got to tell you, they should dismantle completely the CDC, fire Fauci. And the Democrats, I mean, they've got to step aside when it comes to this idea of pushing science or pushing mask wearing or non-mask wearing when it's convenient.
Mercedes, you worked in communications at the Trump White House, so you understand how this is all supposed to be done. It did seem remarkable that there was a real focus from Biden on the economy and businesses, as if this has gone well the last year. And he really talked about just going forward what he thinks should happen, including the resurrection of the Biden spending plan, the Biden agenda, as it's generally referred to in the media, which as soon as he was done, Senator Joe Manchin, who was part of, along with Kristen Sinema, blocking it the last time, came out and said, no, man, that thing's done. Like, that's not happening. How do we square that circle?
Well, I got to tell you, Biden used a lot of B's. It was like building back better. Then it was build better America. It like never ended. And, I think that there is a reality that has set in the minds of Americans. And that despite the fact that Joe Biden was trying to make the case that more jobs have been created and they were able to spend a lot of money to help provide, quote unquote, relief to Americans through this American Rescue Plan, the American people are translating that into higher prices, more inflation, a lot of stress. And the fact is that while wages have gone a little bit up, inflation is basically eating into those wages. It's cutting into those wages. And so it's creating a lot of this economic uncertainty amongst Americans. And I just really think that for the Biden administration to try to tout what he considered accomplishments didn't work. It didn't translate into what Americans are really feeling right now, which is what I call economic fatigue, COVID fatigue, and on top of that, an international crisis where you do feel that President Biden does not have a handle on what's happening in Russia and Ukraine.
It was interesting that the Democrat Party generally spends a lot of time, Joe Biden himself spends a lot of time on issues of race. And there wasn't really a lot of talk about the black community in this country last night from Joe Biden. Here is even New York Times columnist Charles Blow, a man of the left, a Democrat, saying, well, watch.
If you were paying attention, Biden not once mentioned black people, African Americans, Negro, anything in that speech. And that is, and I was kept thinking to myself, what a difference 300 days makes. When Biden gave his speech on the 100th anniversary of him taking office, there was a huge section in there about speaking to, quoting George Floyd's daughter about my dad's going to make history and really hammering home. I mean, I think his quote was, "We have all seen the knee of injustice on the neck of black America." That is how strong that passage was in Biden's speech to black people and about these issues supporting black people in the 100-day speech. Not one word in this speech, even when he was speaking about historically black colleges and universities, he used the acronym.
What do you think about all that?
You know, I got to tell you, I remember when President Trump, during one of his State of the Unions, he brought up historically black colleges and how he was going to ensure that there was permanent funding going to those colleges and universities. And, you know, President Trump also talking about how many of his economic policies led to a decrease, or I should say, a decrease in unemployment rates for the minority community. Look, there is no question that President Biden and his team, they failed to connect with the minority community. He was more focused on the transgender community than he was in really tackling the issues that matter to both the Hispanic community and to the black community. It's why you're seeing this trend happen now, especially in the Hispanic community, where they're basically saying, I'm not connecting with the Democrat Party. I'm more of an independent, or wait a second, let me look into the Republican Party that actually gives my children opportunities, gives me opportunities to grow and prosper in this great country. They don't want, the Hispanic community and the black community, they don't want this radical agenda of defunding the police. They do not want this radical agenda of gender confusion and CRT. That is not what they signed up for. And it's exactly what Biden and the leftist basically party is trying to push on these minority communities.
Mercedes Schlatt. Mercedes, great to see you. Thanks so much.
Great to see you too. Thanks, Buck.
The Russian invasion of Ukraine is now in its 7th day and has faced serious opposition from the Ukrainian military and people. But have the setbacks for the Russian military been overstated? Bill Roggio from the Foundation of Defense of Democracies thinks so. He'll join us later to explain. But first, I want to talk to you about protecting your online data. A lot of companies promise your privacy is guaranteed, but you know that's not true. That's why you need a new privacy and cybersecurity application tool called Secure. It's spelled S-E-K-U-R. Secure is using proprietary encryption and is offering secure instant messaging and email. With Secure, all of your communications based on servers and data centers hosted in Switzerland without any of the big tech platforms that can spy on you. Privacy is a big issue right now. That's why you need Secure. They'll never mine your data, never ask for your phone number. You can send messages, you can communicate online with real confidence in your privacy. Secure is your solution to stop the constant theft of your digital identity. It only costs $5 for the messenger, only $10 for the messenger and email combination package. Go to secure.com and take back your privacy today. That's SEKUR.com. Use promo code BUCK for 25% off. We'll be right back with more. Hold the line. It's now day 7 of the war in Ukraine. Russia continues to bombard the country with bombs and missiles, targeting crowded population centers. And the capital city is, for now, still uncaptured by Putin, but we'll see. Our next guest says that sympathy for the outnumbered and outgunned defenders of Kyiv has led to the exaggeration of Russian setbacks, misunderstanding of Russian strategy, and even baseless claims from amateur psychoanalysts that Putin has lost his mind. Bill Roggio, senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, joins now to explain. Bill, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Buck.
So let's just start with what's the latest today with the Russian advance? How is this going?
Yeah, in the north at Kyiv, the capital, Russians are preparing their encirclement. That could happen within days, and they're preparing to link up with, I think this is close to happening, cutting off two provinces north of Kyiv. And that would secure the entire border between Ukraine and Russia, as well as Belarus. But more importantly, in the south, the city of Kherson, which is in the Black Sea, on the coast of the Black Sea, a city of 300,000 people has just fallen to the Russians. The mayor of Kherson said that 10 Russian officers have come to the building and he's handed over control. The Ukrainian troops have retreated to a nearby city, and the Russians continue their advance.
So let's look at what Biden said last night in general about this Russian invasion of Ukraine. I want to have you respond to it. Play it.
6 days ago, Russia's Vladimir Putin sought to shake the very foundations of the free world, thinking he could make it bend to his menacing ways. But he badly miscalculated. He thought he could roll into Ukraine and the world would roll over. Instead, he met with a wall of strength he never anticipated or imagined. He met the Ukrainian people. Now that he's acted, the free world is holding him accountable. Putin is now isolated from the world more than he has ever been. Putin has unleashed violence and chaos. But while he may make gains on the battlefield, he'll pay a continuing high price over the long run.
What's your assessment of Biden, the commander-in-chief's analysis of Ukraine in that speech?
Well, again, I do agree the Ukrainian people have put up a hell of a fight, but it's just not enough. And I think he's overly optimistic. He claimed that Russia sought a quick victory. And one of the things that I analyze in that Daily Mail article is that, in fact, the Russians have a plan, and this is a plan that will take time to execute. It was never going to be a quick victory. We'll see how the West and the international community holds up. Is it willing to do sanctions? Are easy today. What about next week, next month? What about next winter when Germany needs that 50% of its gas comes from Russia? I think this is it's not as overly optimistic as I expected it's him to be. I expected to hear him say things like the Russians are failing, but I think this is certainly the best case scenario, the rosy glasses scenario that he painted. The reality is the West needed to do far more months prior to this invasion to both deter the Russians and prepare the Ukrainians for war. That didn't happen. And by the way, this does not make him a wartime commander-in-chief. This country is not at war with Russia and does not have plans to go to war with Russia.
So there's a lot of reporting on this 40-mile-long Russian military convoy that is on the way to Kyiv. Is the basic strategy here that they will be deploying soon to just encircle the city and demand the government and Zelensky effectively, resign, give up, call for surrender? How do you think this plays out?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think this formation, it's already pushing west, south, and west of Kyiv, and I do believe it is being its main purpose is to surround the city and force the capitulation of the government. I also think that it will look to link up with troops that are currently in the south. And this would split Ukraine in half. This really would be endgame. You'd have much of Ukraine's military trapped behind enemy lines. If those troops in the Caucasus can link up with the troops in Kyiv, then I really think that we'd be talking endgame here for Ukraine as a viable state. You might get a rump Ukrainian state, or Putin may decide to take the whole thing and push to the Polish border. That's really the next level question there.
So how much do you think the air campaign, the Russian airstrikes and also long-range artillery strikes, missile strikes, is going to escalate and play a major role in this in the days ahead. Because up to this point, there's a lot of footage of Russian convoys getting hit. Looks like getting hit pretty hard with some of those anti-tank munitions that the Ukrainians now have because of Western partners, and they've been getting those for a while. So there is this view that people have of, well, it's just going to continue to be a hard slog on the ground for the Russians. Do you think they're just going to take to the air much more heavily and start pounding Ukrainian positions in a way that the Ukrainian defenses aren't really able to handle at all?
Well, I think they can do that, and if they can do that via the air and via artillery and rocket munitions as well. I mean, look, we just saw a city surrender after a couple of days of fighting, basically surrender without a fight. Do the Ukrainians have this kind of fight? By the way, the Russians are taking casualties. That's without a doubt. The Russian military doctrine is the old Soviet military doctrine. You throw a lot of force at it, you expect to take losses, but in the end you win. But the Ukrainians themselves are also being depleted of munitions. Why is that convoy, that 40-mile long convoy that is just north of 20 miles north of Kiev and advancing westward, why is that not being striked? Do the Ukrainians have the capability and munitions to do this? The Ukrainians are being ground down as well. And I think the example set at Kherson may be one, and particularly if the Russians are able to rule a city like Kherson and not have reprisals against civilians, which I don't think is in their interest anyway. They want to rule the country, not dominate and crush it. It sends a message to Kiev, the people of Kiev, that you may want to surrender this one. It's better than being, better to live than being crushed.
What do you think the Putin strategy looks like as it plays out over the weeks ahead, Bill, at this point?
I think Putin has calculated that, as far as sanctions go, that there's probably a time limit on these. I think that is his calculation. I don't know whether he's made the correct calculation or not. Militarily, I think that, what I described earlier, that push from the south, from Crimea, is looking to link up with Kiev. That'll sever the country in half, trap a large number of Ukrainian forces, and take over Kiev and a couple of major cities, and show the Ukrainian people that the Russians are in control. They've won this war. Then the only real question is does he want the whole country, or is he looking for a rump state that is neutral or is governed by a crony of his? I think that's what we're looking at here in the next days and months. The real big question for me again is, does he want it all, or is he happy with half of Ukraine and then a pliable state to the west?
Bill, what could be done, if anything, to stop that in your mind? Is it just really all in the Ukrainians, or are there outside sanctions, economic actions that could be taken to make him change his calculation?
I think short of a NATO military intervention, which I do not advocate for, that increases the risk of it would be direct war with Russia and increases the risk of a nuclear war. Short of that, I think what you're going to see, and can't tell you if it takes days, weeks, or months, that the Russians will conquer most, if not all, of the Ukraine. And I don't think sanctions won't stop this. Diplomatic actions won't stop this. Prevention of flights, Russian flights, things of that. That's not enough. Putin has put all of his cards on the table. He has gone all in on taking Ukraine. He can't turn back now. He would no longer be president of the country if he did. He's playing to win, while I think the West is just playing to get a best case scenario out of this, get some type of rump Ukrainian government out of this at this point.
Bill, I agree with you. I hope we're both wrong, but I think you're right. Thanks for being with us, as always. Good to see you.
Buck.
Beto O'Rourke is back. Last night, the former congressman won the Democratic nomination for Texas governor. He's going to face off with Greg Abbott in the general election. I'll have more on that with the First TV's Morgen Zegers coming up. Voters in Texas headed to the polls yesterday to kick off the 2022 midterms, and while a few races were just too close to call, Texans did decide which two candidates will face off in the governor's race. Governor Greg Abbott and former Congressman Beto O'Rourke, that's right, that socialist, he's back. In his victory speech, Abbott said that he and his party represent the values and prosperity of the Lone Star State. Check this out.
Republicans sent a message. They want to keep Texas the land of opportunity and prosperity for absolutely everybody, the prosperity that we have delivered over the past 8 years. We are going to deliver a Texas for working families who can flourish under the opportunities provided by the 9th largest economy in the entire world.
Join me now with reaction, founder of Young Americans Against Socialism and contributor here at the First TV, Morgen Zegers. Morgen, what's up?
Hi, Buck. I'm excited. Yesterday was a big deal.
Tell us about it. What went down? What do we need to know? Texas casting votes, casting ballots, and now a big showdown looms of sorts.
Yeah, I mean, so there was a bunch of different things were kind of happening yesterday. So I'm a Texas homeowner. That's partly why I've been watching the primary for the governor's race. But a really important thing that's been going down in states like Texas is the rise of groups like Justice Democrats. So I was monitoring the primaries for the congressional districts because you have a lot of AOC types being funded and supported by the Justice Democrats. And the goal is to replace, in these primary elections, establishment capitalist Dems like maybe Nancy Pelosi, the elitist Dems that we know and love, right? It's to replace them with socialists like AOC, and they actually had one victory, and then one is going into a runoff. So it's interesting and important for us to be monitoring that.
Here is Beto last night in his victory speech, criticizing the current Governor Abbott on a whole range of issues. No surprise. Watch this one.
What I need to do with Abbott is make sure that you know exactly how badly he's failed you. Your electricity bills, which are up $40 to $60 a month over the same time last year and will continue to go up over the next 20 years, that's on him. That's the Abbott tax. The fact that Texas leads the nation in COVID hospitalization for kids, that's on Greg Abbott, who wouldn't allow teachers to require masks in the classroom. When you look at the educational attainment of the people of this state, fourth grade reading comprehension earlier, that's on Abbott.
I mean, what do you make of those? First of all, now the Democrats are going to make energy cheaper. That'd be a fascinating trick to pull.
Well, so I would say it's smart of him to pull the energy card because I was there during last year's winter storm, Buck. I don't know if you remember that one. A lot of power outages, the empty grocery stores. I lived through that and it was scary. A lot of Texans were like, wait, what the heck is happening? And it really disrupted, I think, our way of thought because Texas usually leads, right? So that's smart for him to use that. But what a dummy to be saying that he wants to keep masking kids. If you know one thing in politics these days, it's that mama bears and papa bears across the country are sick of it. They're sick of the abuse their kids go through, and they just want their kids to learn and experience the best opportunities during their developmental years. So what a dumb talking point. Actually, my mouth dropped when you were playing that clip.
It's amazing. They're still pretending that masking up in classrooms, despite enormous amounts of data from all over the country that shows doesn't do anything. But this, Democrats like to believe in this fairy tale that Fauciism was somehow effective. But just going back into the political fray for a second here, Morgan. In Texas's 28th district, there's a runoff, interesting race to watch here. Democratic primary, Congressman Henry Cuellar versus Jessica Cisneros. Cisneros is very progressive, received endorsements from AOC, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren. Cuellar, I've actually seen, I think he occasionally says pretty sane things about the border. So how do you see this one shaping up?
So like I was mentioning earlier, this is a national trend, but it's important for us to watch these purple now states like Texas with what's going to happen when you have establishment Dems versus socialist leftists that are being run by AOC's Justice Democrats. They initially ran AOC, and what they call it now, Buck, is the next generation of Justice Democrats. Once they beat in the primaries these establishment Dems, they join the Progressive Caucus, and their goal is to form a larger and larger caucus of socialists in Washington, D.C. to be able to advocate for more radical legislation. So especially with these victories, and this is a runoff, but the other man won last night in Texas, it's interesting to see this combined with Biden getting more moderate in his talking points in the State of the Union when he was saying things like we need to be funding the police. It's a big and growing fracture in the left between the establishment Dems like Nancy Pelosi and Biden and the radical young leftists.
Another runoff, by the way, Attorney General Ken Paxton, who's the current Attorney General, is going to be in a runoff with George P. Bush. Yes, of those Bushes, that the Bush family that we all know, former presidents, two former presidents of the Bush family. What do you think's going on here? How does this one shake out?
Well, I think people are paying more attention to races like for Attorney General ever before, because now under COVID, they are starting to understand their role in society and their role with checking authoritarian or tyrannical government. And so people are caring more. And that's why you're seeing more competitive races than everybody just kind of going and voting or not showing up to vote at all. So I think that this is a good thing that people are paying attention and these races are more competitive, because we're seeing how important of a role they play when government gets out of hand. I mean, this has been a terrible last 2 years, and attorney generals are supposed to be stepping up. Attorneys general.
Indeed. Morgan, switching gears for a moment, you, I'm sure, watched the State of the Union address last night. You're a politics nerd just like me. You like this stuff. What did you think of how Biden did overall?
Overall, I mean, weak performance, but I'm not going to make that into a story, because my theory on all of this is we should stop expecting something else. I mean, people are saying, do you think it's going to be a weak performance? Do you think he's going to gaslight us and lie to us? I'm sick of this, Buck. Why are we wasting our time acting like they're not going to lie to us? We understand their behavior. Now, what are we going to do about it? We understand they're going to try and secretly walk back their COVID mandates using Ukraine as a distraction and using the State of the Union as a moment to declare victory and say that our State of the Union is strong because the people of America are strong. I'm sorry, but President Biden has attacked the American people more so than anything that we've seen between president and the people in American history. It's fascinating to see. And then he had the gall to tell us that our country's strong because we're strong. We are going up against the tyrannical leaders like him. And I've got to just say, it's bad on our part to be focusing on, do we think Biden's going to lie to us in the next speech or the next one? He's a liar. And now what are we going to do about it? We're going to make sure that they are held accountable. That's the best thing we can do.
Appreciate the overdue cynicism about Joe Biden. Morgan, good to see you.
Thanks, Buck.
A young child is practically run over for daring to want to hug Winnie the Pooh at Disneyland because of COVID. You got to see this. Follow the science, sure. And that and more coming up in Quick Hits. The vice president couldn't help but to quietly correct President Biden during his State of the Union address last night. And like most of us, Governor Ron DeSantis is wondering, where the heck is Dr. Fauci? It is time for Quick Hits. Now, look, we've talked a bunch about the State of the Union address from last night, and I've tried to avoid pointing out that at one point Nancy Pelosi just started doing this kind of thing with her hand. There's some weird stuff that happened there for sure. But, I guess we expect some of that. Look at who's running the country for the Democrats these days. They're all in their 80s. What's that all about? But Joe Biden is clearly slowed down a bit. He's missing a step here or there. And one of the moments that you kind of saw that was when he was trying to say Ukrainian and just happened to say Iranian. Now, I know they rhyme, so they're kind of close in that sense. But they're not really geographically close, nor are they that similar in a whole bunch of ways. Anyway, Kamala Harris actually seemed to mouth Ukrainian when Biden said Iranian. Watch.
Putin may circle Kyiv with tanks, but he'll never gain the hearts and souls of the Iranian people. He'll never extinguish their love of freedom, and he will never weaken the resolve of the free world.
I mean, I guess it's true. He will not. Fact check. He will not win the hearts of the Iranian people with this. That is true. I do think he meant Ukrainian, and even Kamala picked up on that one. COVID madness is a mental illness now. It has been for a long time, but people see it now because even as the same authorities they relied on the whole time to tell them whether it was safe or not are saying, yeah, no, it's safe. people are not accepting it. They don't want to hear it. No, you don't tell me that that's safe. I don't want to believe that it's safe. And so you have a lot of these stupid rules and restrictions that are still out there, or at least people impose them on themselves. So there's a child who's at Disneyland, and a young child wanted to go up and hug Winnie the Pooh, obviously a human being in a Winnie the Pooh costume, although it would be amazing if there was an actual Winnie the Pooh to hug. Here's how that went because of COVID hysteria. Watch.
There's Pooh Bear! Oh, you can't go hug, you can't hug, you can't hug. Sorry. I didn't know she was gonna run up on him.
No hugs allowed because COVID. You know, last night they were socially distanced at the State of the Union, just not wearing masks, but socially distanced. Social distancing is based on just a guess. It's nothing. There's no real science behind this at all. Then stay away from people and maybe you won't get sick. It's insane. It's an anxiety disorder masquerading as some kind of scientific policy. Oh boy. And then there's this. Biden declared the answer is not to defund the police, it's to fund the police. BLM tweeted this out. You're going to check this out. That this is this is a member of Congress listening to Biden declare that. BLM apparently trying to suggest that there's deep unhappiness in some parts of the Democrat Party with Biden saying funding the police is the answer. Here's what Joe Biden's trying to do with that. Let's just be very clear. Doing his part to try to erase the memory of so many Democrats, Kamala and Pelosi and the squad in Congress, who gave at least some, if not very direct and open support to the defund the police narrative, which has resulted in the biggest spike in homicides in, 40 years now? I think it might be all time for 1 year in terms of the nationwide increase. It's pretty astounding that Democrats went along with this as long as they did. And then on to something that I think is a positive. Well, you tell me. Fauci, not exactly showing up these days. Where is Fauci? I mean, is he hiding in a thimble somewhere? Should we check all the desk drawers at the NIH or the CDC? Where is little tiny Tony? Governor DeSantis wants to know too. Watch.
Think about what they've done. Fauci is in the witness protection program now. They don't want him out. They've never supported any. If you listen to them, they never supported all these policies that were so destructive. Now it's like, we all want to be like Florida all of a sudden, and nothing has changed. There's been no change in the underlying science. The ineffectiveness of those policies was apparent long ago. The destructiveness of those policies was apparent long ago. And they were the ones that were dipping their nose into Florida's business last summer, saying that 2-year-old kids needed to be forced masked when they leave the house.
He's so right, and the libs are so wrong. That's it for tonight's Hold the Line. The No Spin News with Bill O'Reilly is next. Shields high.